Welcome to our video podcast from the Council Gallery with Maree Duffy-Moon and Steve Prothero.
So, ICAC's in the news again. We've seen the hearings and both of us have seen this sort of behaviour inside organisations. So that's really what's going to run through today's discussion. So the show is called From the Council Gallery. And what that means is as if you're in the council gallery watching a council meeting unfold, and hopefully through our conversations you'll be better informed and you'll pick up on some of the key things that may not have previously been visible. So the show, it's not a shock jock type discussion. The show will be more about procedure, experience, and hopefully will benefit ratepayers to get a better feeling for the council, and the council's the closest form of government that's to you. It's the one that provides the roads and you pay the rates and the garbage and food safety, etc. So it's a really in-your-face government. Also, the two of us have worked inside government. I've worked in the Federal Public Service, and I'll talk about that a bit later. And my good friend here, Maree Duffy-Moon, I'll introduce her in a moment, and she can give you some of her background and what she brings to this show, which I think is a wealth of experience, including being a councillor, which I certainly haven't. So first up, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Maree Duffy-Moon, and I'll hand over to her for her to explain her background and what she brings to the podcast.
Thanks, Steve. I just want to say I'm grateful to be here and grateful for the invitation. I have been supportive of your work. I think it's great that you have bringing a lot of experience and a lot of information to an area that seems a lot of people don't understand. And as you said, it really is where the rubber hits the pothole. In the case of the third level of government, the third level of government doesn't work anything like the other two. And I think that's something that people also don't understand. As for my background, I started as a nurse when I was 15, went on to do a social work degree, a bachelor in psychology, and followed on through with that type of work up until in my 30s when I burnt out. And then I decided to turn my hand to real estate. Seemed to make sense. A psychologist selling real estate knew how to tell people what they wanted to buy. And that led to a stint of nearly 10 years within the housing cottage industry, working for a developer. And then my first stint into the public service in Canberra, which was Defence Housing Authority. So that was, although an authority, it was a public service. And it was interesting coming from private industry and going into a public service environment. And that's very important because it's opened my eyes up to the way that the government worked. And so from DHA, I had a 3-year stint over in Los Angeles on a diplomatic post. And then I came back and went to work in Parliament House in 2001. And that began a very long career as a ministerial advisor for a few opposition leaders. And then when the Rudd government got in, I worked for the Health Minister, the Home Affairs Minister, the Defence Minister, the Aged Care Minister, and finally the Trade Minister, finishing up there as the Chief of Staff in that role. And then did a bit of contracting because the Liberal government got in. I couldn't stand to be in Canberra any longer. I put a hand on my heart. I'm a Labor person, so I'm going to put that out there. But we're going to try and make this non-political. Just thought it was reasonable to be honest about where I come from. So I was a Labor advisor. And then I went to work as a contractor for Health Department, for the Attorney Generals in the Native Title Department. And so I left, and then I came down here to care for my elderly parents. So I semi-retired, did a bit of work for the local MP down here in between being a carer. And then someone asked me to become a councillor. So I campaigned for that as a Labor councillor and was successful, although it was a very tight vote. It ended up in court due to the aye vote. But I did become a councillor and I had 3 years there and it was enlightening. And what I'll finish with there, not to belabour the point, was after the 14 years in politics, I was shocked at what it was like to be a local councillor. I thought I would be prepared for it, but I certainly was not prepared for it. And that has led me right here to you about transparency, honesty, integrity, and those sort of things. And that's what I intend to bring to your show, and I appreciate your giving that opportunity to me.
Certainly, Maree, that is absolute stellar wealth of experience for people who haven't been in government. Working in the minister's offices and being chief of staff is as close to power as you can get, and you can see the machinations of what's going on. I'll start at the start, I guess, is a good place. I schooled at 15. I became a printer. I then used that apprenticeship to get myself into the AFP, where I had a pretty good career. I only had 10 years there, but I was at one stage Australia's youngest detective sergeant. I think I was only, 25, 26, which was pretty much unheard of. The AFP was growing quite fast, so there was plenty of opportunity. I don't think that is no longer the case. So after 10 years in the AFP, I had a family of 4. Being an operational detective is a pretty hard gig, and quite often I came away with PTSD, as did I know a lot of other officers. When you're at that sort of sharp edge of policing, murders and suicides are pretty much a regular occurrence. So I had a particularly bad murder at Richardson where a family of 4 were murdered. 2 young children were the same age as my kids, and it had quite a bad impact on me for a while. So I decided to leave, and I decided I need to up my education. So I enrolled in a undergraduate degree in public administration, which I completed. I was fortunate enough to suddenly work out that the harder you worked, strangely enough, good things seem to happen. I won the CPSU prize for public policy while I was at the Uni of Canberra. I then went off and joined the public service. I spent my entire working career, except for a short period, in the agriculture department. And you can think, you don't look like a farmer. No, I'm not a farmer. But I worked originally in their investigations area, looking at offences under the Quarantine Act and the Export Control Act. So we had meat inspection and export activity on one end and the quarantine function on the other. I got quite close to how the public service views potentially criminal activity. And in my view, it was a bit soft, but I mellowed as well. And I can see why compliance was more than prosecution. So that was a useful thing. Again, I progressed quite quickly in the public service. I ended up running at one stage the import program, which was largely quarantine inspection for all air and sea freight. And that had a budget of over $100 million a year. I effectively had to liaise with industry about fee setting and other bits and pieces. It was a really good job. I really enjoyed it. I got promoted into the SES. I took a role in Biosecurity Australia, which is a policy arm of quarantine. And the hard edge there is negotiating with local growers and others who really don't want imported product coming into the country, and they will use the quarantine element as a trade block. I formed the view there that we're part of the world economy and we benefit largely from our export industries into other countries. So if you stop importing things from foreign countries and they do the same, our farmers would go broke very quickly, very quickly. So out of that, I also, at that stage, I went off and did an MBA at the Australian Graduate School of Management. That was excellent. I was the oldest one there. I think they thought, why is this old fart bothering to get himself educated? But that was pretty good. And I had a very good boss who also sent me over to Harvard University to do a leadership program with Ron Heifetz. And Ron Heifetz and Marty Linsky at that stage were the bee's knees in public policy and leadership. So the Australian Public Service Commission really pushed this idea of Linsky and Heifetz. So that was good. On my retirement, I came down to Brewer Lake, and as a result of that, I got involved in a few community things. My PTSD hasn't been kind. I can get a bit grumpy occasionally. So I decided I really needed to just be with myself, if you like. I was watching the local election, and I'm a social democrat. Grew up in the Whitlam years and was a very big fan of Whitlam. I've seen him live, and later in the AFP, I worked for a short stint of personal protection to Malcolm Fraser, which was interesting,
Wow.
if you remember those days. Yeah, so that was that. Yeah, so the local elections here, I was astounded. I was absolutely rocked back. I thought the Greens and Labor were doing quite a reasonable job, apart from this debt issue. And the debt issue was they uncovered the systemic issues around the debt, but then SIG turned it and blamed the Greens. The Greens Greens and Labor had one term. And apart from all that, it was SIG and pseudo-liberals, all liberals. So Joanna Gash, etc., Team Gash. And SIG, as you may know, they're not independents. They're a political party. Mr. Watson had a very interesting time. If he was in Queensland, I think he'd be a white shoe brigade man. He was pretty controversial. And as a result, when the election came around, what I witnessed was just unbelievable. Just out and out lies. Just lies just flew from them. Yeah. And they were smart enough and wise enough to get Gareth Ward as their opening act for the election. Now, those who know Gareth Ward, he's probably done more to harm the Liberal Party cause in Kiama and the Shoalhaven than any other person. His politics was particularly dirty. And then he was, at that stage, he'd been charged with sexual offences and was then later convicted. So I thought to myself, who in their right mind as a political party bring out a spokesman who's facing trial for sexual offences? But there you go. That was SIG. I then started the I, and the I did start as I on SIG because they had the numbers. So I was always interested in politics, and them having the numbers, I thought this is going to be very interesting, and it certainly has been. So really, that's my interest: public policy, governance, and didn't say in the AFP. I was also involved with internal affairs, looking at corruption between the AFP and the New South Wales Police, where we had a few convicted, and probably should have been a few more. But anyway, that's another story. So that's me.
It's interesting. There's a few crossovers I see with us there, Steve, not only our passion for truth and integrity in politics, but my ex-husband too. I think he was also, when we moved to Canberra, he went into the same area as you, and he was fastidious about the idea of corruption within the police force. And he at that time worked with Audrey Fagan, who sadly is not with us anymore.
I worked with Audrey in the drug squad, and she was a brilliant young woman. And it was very sad for those who don't know. Audrey later got involved in some ACT politics, which was dirty against her. They did the dirty on her, and unfortunately she took her own life, which was a very sad.
No, absolutely not. It's a really hard job, and I think it probably goes, to me, it's a bit much like nursing. We don't get medals in nursing, but it's the same thing you're confronted with. I think my first dead body was at 15 years old. So you're confronted with that all of your career. Yeah. And no, everyone's quick to criticise, but not a lot of people are quick. And I think that feeds into me about councillors and perhaps political staff. You go into council, you become a councillor, I think, with a view to... It was let's be honest, with SIG, and Gareth was also heavily involved in the Shell Harbour Council with Kelly Marsh and Homer. So he infected the coast, up and down the coast, from Shell Harbour right down to you guys down there.
Well, that's what I'd say about Gareth Ward as well. His style of politics was just so corrosive and really did the Liberal Party no good. And I did know Grant Schultz.
Oh, it's another ex-AFP. Great guy too.
I'll go back. So that was a very corrosive time, and unfortunately Grant Schultz, who was another AFP officer, and his wife also an AFP officer, not my politics, but a straight shooter and a very honest guy, and the Liberal Party did the dirty on him, put in Mundine as the candidate, which was a complete waste of space.
Absolutely ridiculous.
And here we go. So the Liberal Party on the coast is pretty well shot, I think, because of Gareth Ward.
Oh, I think it was the whole... I think you referred earlier, yes, it was him, but certainly that collective on the council early with Joanna Gash and Anson Marlison, and that group of people were extremely toxic for a number of levels of government, and they left a imprint on our councils ever since that have... And some of that toxic behaviour is still going on today. It seems we just can't get away from it, and the only way we're doing it at the moment is certainly by your eye on Shoalhaven, and to a lesser degree my eyes on Shell Harbour. But we do need to hold our councils better to account. We're not getting service, we're getting more concerns about what small business want from our regions rather than what our residents who pay the rates want.
Well, I think, Maree, that's dead right. I think it's very, I won't say easy, but I think people, cost of living pressure and just attention and families, thinking about council politics is like, oh my God, why would I bother? Exactly. But why would I bother is exactly why we bother, because it's the thing that quite often is corrupted first with developers and other bits and pieces, and politicians who are really below par, not skilled. Yeah, I know, and you can see it on our current council, in my personal opinion. This is where you've got the Council of Steels and the council. You wouldn't employ these people, again, my opinion, but yet here they are on council, largely wasting time, effort and staff resources. But anyway.
And that probably takes us to an important point for people who talk to us or ask us questions. Where are these people drawn from? And I think there's an assumption about where people who put their hand up to be a councillor come from. And there's a limitation, obviously. You have to have the time. You have to probably not have a full-time job, because it is a job that requires a lot of involvement in daytime events and reading and things like that. So where are they coming from? Traditionally, if it's Labor, they're coming from the Labor Party. They're coming from a branch, or they're coming from a union, or they're coming from some kind of apparatchik type background, pretty much like myself. But they still represent the community, right? So even if they come from that. And similarly with when it was the Liberals, they come from some kind of branch structure, some kind of Liberal structure. In Paul L's consideration, he was working a long time for Gareth Ward, and then he became a councillor. That was his path, with a hopeful path to becoming a state MP. There's a path associated. We see many councillors really striving to get to that next level of government, like Anson Marlis, who went federal, and Gareth, who went from council. I think we've got to look at the motivations. And I'm concerned that the motivation we have for at least half of our councillors at every time is political, not community-based. And that's where the whole thing, to me, is falling apart. It falls apart in the chamber due to party politics, and it falls apart outside in the community for the same reason.
You're right. I have to declare here that I'm no longer a member of the Labor Party. I had some views that didn't accord with where the Labor Party was going, but still I vote Labor and I vote Green.
Hey, I'm a lefty, remember, I can veer.
But for example, if you look at the council here in the Shoalhaven, the standout stars to me are Debbie Killian, Gemma Tribe. Gemma Tribe should be mayor. She comes from a Liberal background, but is really community orientated. She runs a food service for privileged people. I think she comes with a strong religious background, and she's an excellent person. Then you look at Christoulakis, another good guy, Labor guy, and I did campaign for Gillian Boyd. I've known Gillian for a couple of years, and she's straight as an arrow. So there are some good people on there. Matthew Norris, probably not as much with Matthew. We've had a few disagreements, but again, compared to the opposite side down here, when I say the opposite side, the people who won the election for SIG down here was one for Mayor, Patricia, mainly because she just drives around constantly collecting allowances, and people think she's the greatest thing since bee's knees. But she didn't win by a large majority. Then the second two you've got is Bob Proudfoot and you've got Wilkins. They're the ones that drag the others along. Casmiri, Clancy in Labor terms would be called a Labor rat. She joined with Gemma Tribe, got elected, and then went straight back to the Conservatives with White. So a mixed bag, and certainly, as we can see, the SIG haven't covered themselves in glory they've got the safe work findings about bullying inside the chamber. It wasn't about outside the chamber, it was inside the chamber. And then you've got the Office of Local Government inquiry, which I think is going to be, when it all comes to a conclusion, I think it's going to be a big bang. I think there's going to be a lot of people in real strife out of that inquiry.
Or will it be another toothless? My fear is that the Office of Local Government don't have a lot of teeth, and whilst they might produce a report that ends up with a slap on the wrist, what will be the true outcome of that?
My take on it, with my investigator hat on, is that the OLG will gather the first lot of evidence and will be feeding it to ICAC. So I think where this is going to end up is in ICAC. And Bob Proudfoot and Wilkins have already stated that they're calling for an ICAC inquiry, so there must be something in there that they see. And as with the secrecy provisions around ICAC, they could be all over this stuff and nobody knows. And if they do know, they can't say. But as an investigator, I would imagine whatever's coming into OLG is going straight to ICAC, and ICAC's, I would think, are winding up for a look at the council, which I think is appropriate. As I said this morning on the blog, when you look at the pink ladies, there's another definition of that, and it's a criminal conspiracy. that'd be my view, where you join a group to get a certain outcome that may break laws on the way. It's classic conspiracy. Local government probably doesn't look at that. They look at the issues around breach of public office and other bits and pieces. But I'm sitting there, and as an old investigator, we'd fall back to conspiracy. If there wasn't a lot of evidence on specific charges, the common law conspiracy is still very powerful. So I certainly wouldn't like to be in some people's boots. And the old line of being a witness as opposed to being a suspect rings true, which I did say to a couple of the councillors here. You're much better being a witness, mate, than being a suspect. What's in it for you, the listener? A couple of things. One is the experience that we bring from a governance perspective, working in government, Maree actually being a councillor, me being a pseudo-academic around governance and a practitioner of corruption. So we've got a good set of eyes to put on councils. Hopefully you're going to get a lot of pretty straight talking and
debate at times.
And good debate, we hope. Interesting debate. There'll be plain language explanations of issues so that you get a better understanding, because it's not really that complicated, but they use, like typical of government, they use a lot of jargon and lots of depops and all sorts of things. What the hell's that about? So we'll break that down. We'll give you some real examples from our personal experience, of course, anonymised so that we don't end up in debtor's prison somewhere. I did publish an article this week on defamation, which defamation's not as easy as some people think, because it used to be the old scare tool that politicians would reel out to shut people up. There were some good amendments from the New South Wales government on that. We'll also bring you some tools to apply to when you think about some of these issues, and we'll be supported by the Substack articles, and I'm sure even Maree may be a guest writer on some of these issues.
Sure.
Because I'm like some crazy machine spitting this stuff out daily. Well, the change of voice might probably a good thing. So we're not going to lecture people. It's up to you to make your mind up on who you vote for. And personally, I don't really care who you vote for, as long as you go into it with open eyes. As long as you actually look at these people and scrape off the rubbish. For example, the roads, rates and rubbish that came from SIG, they've done nothing. They've done nothing on that. What we've got is inquiry, intrigue, all sorts of political manoeuvring, but the core promise is nothing. So we'll do that. Maree?
I think that for me, obviously the focus of this has been through Shoalhaven, but a lot of what we're seeing both at ICAC currently and across councils who have been brought through to ICAC is it goes all over. What we're demonstrating is this is not unique to one council or another. So in my example with Shellharbour Council, there was a lot that I did see that I was unable to query. I was blocked, I was muted, and I was a pain to everyone. And I think that's the experience as I talk to other councillors. That was a common experience. And again, we've seen it highlighted with the Pink Ladies at Parramatta Council in that the CEO determined what went before council. She determined whether they should be investigated. And all through that, she forgot that in actual fact, the elected councillors were her boss. She wasn't their boss, and she had no right to do that. And I think we will be exploring some of those expectations or how a council should work versus what we're seeing every day by councils across the state. And I've seen a lot of Facebook posts, for instance, from Wingecarribee, from Campbelltown. There are a number that seem to be joining our sort of Facebook pages and saying, look, it's going on here too, we want your help. Yeah. So I think we'll be trying to keep it around Shoalhaven because it is a Shoalhaven sort of thing, but I think it's wise for us to expand and look at other councillors who councils who are experiencing similar behaviour.
Yeah, exactly. As you say, the Pink Ladies with the grand statement that this is common practice.
Yeah.
Why I did this was it's common practice. Oh, it's unlawful and completely out of control. Yeah, but it's common practice. As if it's the old speeder. Yeah, I may be speeding, but everybody speeds.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So the other thing there, as you were talking, I was thinking about the sort of organisational psychology issues, and Steve, master of everything. I did do some organisational psych. And I just ask listeners to think back to when they're at school in their class. From the outside, as people walk past your classroom, they look in and they see a bunch of kids sitting there. Now, if you're in that class, you know that the internal politics and the in-groups and the out-groups, that's exactly like humans. Humans are monkeys. We do monkey things, and we build alliances for our own benefit or for the benefit of our in-group, and we create enemies. And when we create enemies, they've got to be punished. So this is a basic human thing that happens at all levels. And Maree, I'm sure you would have seen that in Parliament House. Even within the same political party, there's the ins and the outs and the dries and the wets and et cetera, et cetera.
I experienced the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd, and to be totally honest, I stuck with Rudd, much to a lot of my feminists' unfortunate behaviour I was claimed to have had. But nevertheless, there were reasons for that. But they were cliques. They were about who was in, who was out, and that included staff. And there was an expectation about how you behaved and who you supported and which union. And there's such a lot of that. Yeah. And even at a council level, as Labor, you're only allowed to caucus on the choice of positions. You're not allowed to caucus on anything else, but you can discuss things that have come up at council. But you also have your Labor principles, which are you adhere to a certain amount of policy, and therefore sometimes what maybe I felt was a bit, probably somebody would describe as green, I probably just stayed quiet because it didn't accord with my council or with my Labor. And that's frustrating at another level. So that kind of covers off what you're saying about.
So anyway, so that's just an anecdote from where we did name somebody. We haven't reached cabinet in confidence. I think it was many years ago.
I guess that can take us to what's coming next, what we can expect to see in the upcoming segments. And you have a plan around that, certainly, Steve. What you feel that we should deal with, and I assume that'll be relatively fluid depending on if we get any feedback.
Yeah. I think in the future episodes we'll probably have a mix of things. I think there's some explanatory things where people just don't know how things happen, what's the role of the council, what's the role of the chief executive, what's the role of the directors, and as you picked up so beautifully, which is dead right, and I've seen it in the public service as well, who controls the agenda. So it's what goes up to council, what council are told, how that information's shared, what's not told, how that's buried. So there's a big wealth of information there that we've probably got current examples of, and we've probably got historical examples of from when you were on council maybe. I think the sort of that grey zone between what happens in a culture, and we've touched on culture in organisations. Yes, on paper, it's the chief executive, the directors, etc. But there can also be, and we used to say in the police, that the people that run the police isn't the commissioner, it's the sergeants. Yeah. So the people in that level there, they're the gatekeepers of what goes up, what goes down, who they protect and who they put on the outer. So quite often in corruption, that sort of level, that sort of sergeant level plays a major issue. And I think we probably see that in councils it takes a sort of whole raft of things not to go right to allow that level of fraud. So people, I would suspect, must have known something wasn't quite right, didn't speak out, or maybe they did only after. I don't know. That's just my opinion. That's not saying anything about
that. But that actually prompts another point that's come to me out of the Parramatta ICAC and dovetails nicely with the new review of the Code of Conduct or meeting principles, in that it always calls out councillor behaviour. And here's where you go. You have only two choices, really. You can go to the CEO and put a complaint in, or you can go to the mayor. Now, if both of those are colluding, you have at Shoalhaven and we have here at Shellharbour, where does the councillor go? And if you get bolshy on the floor of the council, they can shut you down and kick you out. There's an awful lot of power there. So what we end up with is huge amounts of frustration that starts to play out publicly, because there's nothing more the media likes than a bit of salacious gossip about a couple of councillors going the biff. And I'm mindful of the time that four of us got up and walked out because it was just pointless. We just couldn't speak. We were shut down. It was on a key issue about expenditure, and we were pilloried for getting up and walking out without any explanation or a look at what the frustration was that caused four councillors to get up and walk out in a meeting. It was very pointed, but that's an issue we need to discuss. Councillors are muted. The muting of councillors, which ends up in frustration, which ends up in ICAC.
That's right. And that's exactly right. The whole code of conduct process is about a series of little corrections. It's not a punishment. It's about saying, no, that behaviour wasn't right. Lift your game. Here's what you should be doing and recorrecting. But the councillors and the CEO and the mayor don't want their councillors to have a code of conduct recorded against them. I won't talk, because you can't talk about code of conducts. But I did see an interesting example only, I think, with the last meeting, where the mayor actually threatened Councillor Killian with a code of conduct. Now, that's actually prohibited by the code of conduct. Yeah, it was an interesting situation where she said, oh, I'll lodge a code of conduct, which is in fact a threat, which you can't do. But anyway, it was done. So we'll be able to talk about code of conduct and GIPRA.
And behaviour more broadly, that what is acceptable behaviour, what's not acceptable behaviour, and what does the community expect from a councillor they've elected, and how much do they know about that councillor? We know the social media is brutal and can seriously upend a councillor's personal life, let alone the potential. And you're there for under $30,000 a year. Yeah. You don't go there for the money or the great fame. You might go there to look for a job as a state MP or a federal MP, and that's a different kettle of fish altogether. But overall, I think the expectation of a councillor, we need to tease that out as well.
Yeah, that's dead right. So anyway, hopefully that's what you're going to expect from us. We hope it's going to be, we're going to do our best to make it informative. We're going to do our best to make it interesting. And the ultimate aim is so that when you go into the polling booth to vote, you know why you're voting and who you're voting for and why. So that's critical. That's the purpose of why we spend so many hours thinking about council issues. It's not about prompting one team. It's about getting better councillors in the chamber doing a good job. And there are good people. Unfortunately, there are also lots of duds, rauders and snout troughers.
Yeah,
I don't know
that's
what you call
right,
them.
yeah.
People that put their snout in the trough.
In the trough,
There's a lot of those. Where you'll find the show, we'll be putting it up on Substack. I'll be putting it up on YouTube, and I'll keep you advised as we expand it out to make it available. And I don't know whether there's people lining up in the streets demanding podcasts on council matters, but we'll see. If you look at YouTube, there's all sorts of things you go, who'd watch that? Then I find myself watching it, so don't know.
I think it's quite topical right now. I think ICAC has made it topical, and I think Shoalhaven has made it topical. Shellharbour's a bit of a sleeper at the moment. Wingecarribee is out in the open now, and I think there are enough issues out there that it can be topical, and we don't have to make it coast to coast. We can discuss. If people are interested, we can say, that's what's happening in your council. What do you think about that? And what can you do about it? Because what you provide with the information you provide is how to do a GIPA or how to ask the right questions. And that applies right across the board to anyone. So.
I mean, I think I'll go back when I was asked as a young man, my friends thought, join the police. Why would you do that? And there's an old saying, somebody should do something. And then I realised I was somebody. So I think that's a key issue, that you can't expect things to get better by themselves. You've got to be active in a democracy. And if you're not active in a democracy, you'll get the democracy that you deserve, and it'll probably be no democracy at all, as we're currently seeing in the US. So it's in all our interest of your children, your family, and your friends, that you understand that democracy and participation and informed participation is really an obligation that we have for future generations of Australians.
Oh, absolutely. And I think just quickly, I'll say, people said to me, why on earth would you want to go into politics? People don't respect politics. And I said, I never want to be a politician. I want to be a person. But why would you give up that salary to earn next, because it wasn't a great salary, to go and work in the big house and all that sort of stuff? And I'm the same as you. At that time, I said, I spent all my time bitching about what's going on out in politics. And how about I pick up my cudgel and say, all right, get in there. You have a chance to make a difference. And I do feel I achieved by the policy I wrote, and that I did make a difference in some areas. So you can, by engaging, make a change. That's right. And that's why we're here.
You're dead right. The true essence of public service is exactly that, service. You're not there, it's quite well paid. In local towns, even the council jobs are well paid jobs, comparatively for others. But it's about service. It's about you're there to serve your fellow citizens and try to make the joint a bit better. And I'm sure I've seen many politicians that do it. It can wear them down and they can get caught up in the horse trading that's needed to get a particular policy through. But generally, there's a lot of good people trying to do the best they can in difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
The other thing we ask is that if viewers or listeners, whichever way you take the podcast, have got questions, we'd love to get your questions and love to get your interest so that we can steer those, because if you've got the interest, more than likely a lot of other people have got the interest. Please get your questions in, and maybe a bit later we'll even try and get in some audio questions so you can have your voice heard on this podcast. So anyway, So,
And tell us why, Steve, you called it the gallery.
so as I said, it's two issues. It's a bit like the eye. What I think we all need to do in our democracy is we need to critically look at issues. Now, I don't mean critically in the sense of slagging off at everyone, but we need to look to see what the reality is against what the promise was. And in the chamber is from probably the federal parliament. When you are in the chamber, it can be a shocking experience watching question time. But you do need to understand it. And hopefully we can also bring other perspectives that if we were in the gallery, we'd be able to say to you why that's happening is because of X, Y, and Z. And over here, you'll notice this alignment, what that's about is this. So instead of just hearing Depop and all these other sort of acronyms, hopefully we can help you understand as if we were there with you in the chamber, telling you our experience and our observations. And again, you can take it or leave it. You may go, oh, yeah, whatever, Steve, or Maree, good on you. But that there is experiences. We're old elders. We're old tribal elders. So that's right. That's right. Okay.
We thank you for listening, obviously. Thank you for watching, if you're watching. And can I just sign off by saying that's all you're going to get as a gift from the gallery today. Thanks for being with us.
Bye. Thank you.